And hello, everybody. Welcome back for another episode, if not now when. Today, oh my goodness, I am so beyond excited because you all are in for the trip. Today, we have incredible guest, Carl, on the show today. And if you don't know Carl, which you really should, Carl, he is an innovator and also serious entrepreneur. He founded 4 companies. Oh my goodness. He holds more than 40 granted patents and services. And he also really supporting nonprofit. He's on board for 2 NGOs. He's really passionate about innovation and technology and really focusing on solving the human most pressing need and issue. Today, Carl, he is a founder and CEO for Möbius Aero. Currently, is one of the founding members building an all-electric Formula One air racing plane. His vision really is to create a cleaner, a safer, and more sustained technology for all humanity for the future. With that, everybody, I am just so excited, beyond honor. Thank you so much, Carl, for joining us, and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here.
Yes, Carol. So, what you sound just, wow, incredible. You're working on highly sophisticated technology. So tell us, how does it all begin? What is your background?
Well, I had a little bit different path than most people. I grew up in a very agrarian, very low-income environment. At a very early age of 11 and 12, I became the primary income for a family of 6. And my brother, who was just a year younger than me, he and I were the primary source of income until I asked my parents to leave when I was 19. And so I finished raising my 2 younger siblings, and kind of had to figure out my path from there. And so the one thing that environment did for me is it taught me the value of hard work. It taught me the value of improving myself to get out of some of the hard work I didn't like, and it taught me how to persevere. So that's like, so really the key was I wound up I missed my opportunities I'd earned some scholarships, but I lost those my senior year, having to make some decisions to continue to care for my family and or go to college, and I chose to care for my siblings. So I wound up having to do it the long and hard way, but like I said, perseverance is the key in that factor. So,
wow, talking about grit, talking about perseverance, talking about hard work, talking about truly serving leaders and how you truly step up and for the family, you choose a different path. That's incredible. So tell us, you did not choose to go to college. Instead, you choose to take care of your siblings, your family. How do you end up being an entrepreneur focusing on the robotic, the future-facing technology? How does that even come about?
I would have to say the fact that I refused to let go of my passions. I had to do what I had to do. And so I wound up doing a lot of manual labor, a lot of what people would consider menial work. But I will tell you, in that process, I met some of the most intelligent people I will ever know in my lifetime. I make the joke when I'm talking to engineers and prospective customers and partners that there's 2 people I will never get into an intellectual battle with. I will never get into a mathematic competition with a machinist, and I will never get into a problem-solving contest with a West Texas farmer. That's all those 2 individuals do all day long, and they are some of the most brilliant people I've ever had the pleasure of working with. So I learned a lot from them about being a critical thinker and a problem solver.
So really, you just have a passion for technology, for mathematics, and you self-taught everything?
Yes. I mean, clearly, I had other people in my path that I gleaned every ounce of information I could from.
Mhm.
But that's where that statement I made earlier about the long hard path. So I had to provide. Had to take jobs, work multiple jobs, and provide income for my family while using any time I could with gleaning any information I possibly could to educate myself, so that I could pursue my passions, which really is magnetics. I love electricity and magnetics, electromagnetism. I love mechanical machines. I like fixing things, making things work, building things. So I just sought that information. I was very fortunate that I was born in the age of the dawn of the internet. And so I had the Library of Congress at my fingertips for most of my adult life. And so that was a big, big benefit. I mean, there were universities like MIT who put their engineering classes online for free. And while you don't get a degree, I got the information. So, things like that where it's really being capable of persevering through the upsets and the downfalls, and keeping your path, keeping your eyeballs on the things that interest you. I just kind of fed my mind. And from there, the creative problem solving kicked in and took that information and developed solutions. So,
Wow, Carl. And I want to unpack that a little bit. I can imagine there are so many nights, evenings, weekends you're just spending in the library looking for information, searching and learning, and while working multiple jobs and trying to supporting yourself and the family. I'm curious, how is it? How do you able to push yourself forward? Because we all just are 24 hours a day, right? How do you? Is there a time that you just don't feel like doing it? How do you able to truly and really persevere and really, despite the circumstance, you still dedicate yourself, you still put the hour in and really self-taught all those, technology, innovation, and all that. How does that like? Do you have a? How do you motivate yourself?
well, that's a great question, and I have kind of a funny answer to that. I will catch myself saying I always wanted to learn to play the piano, or I always wanted to learn to play the guitar, but clearly I didn't, because I put my effort into something else. And
Mhm,
so it was a good idea, but it wasn't the passion I pursued.
mhm,
And I think in this regard, it was the passion of all the things I wanted to do. Um, Gaining information and gaining knowledge was the one I actually pursued. So,
mhm,
between the internet and PBS
mhm,
and the library, I spent, my time, I enjoyed the consumption of that information. And
mhm,
usually I was only learning what I needed to learn to work on a project that I was working on. So I would come up with an idea,
mhm,
and I knew I didn't have the knowledge or skills
mhm,
to properly engineer or design that project.
mhm,
So then I got as far as I could until I figured out as many of the unknowns as I could identify. So
mhm,
there's a famous line that there's what you know, there's
mhm,
what you don't know, but then there's what you don't know that you don't know. And so you start off with the first two, and you learn the third one along the way, what you didn't know that you didn't know. And so
mhm,
as I'm as I try these projects, as I try these builds, and I
mhm,
bump into these obstacles, instead of that being a barrier that stops me,
mhm,
and this is what I've always told my daughter growing up, is when you hit an obstacle that seems insurmountable, it's just there to keep everyone else out. It'll separate you from everyone else. You overcome that barrier, and it separates you from everyone else. And so
wow.
that's how I look at it. Is I hit an obstacle, and if I can overcome that obstacle, then I am one step further down this
Mhm,
road, for down roads that few have been down.
mhm,
So I that's what I just would I would take this passion project, and then I would go and learn what I had to learn to complete
mhm.
it.
I love that. I love what you said about the obstacles and that just one pathway for you to be further along and truly, shows that this is what you really wanted to do rather than just said you wanted to do. And I can also sense so much love, so much passion in learning and, continue to educate yourself and truly follow through the passion, the heart. With that, now back to you, Carl. Now it sounds like you were working multiple jobs. You spend weekends. You learn about knowledge, technology, and all that in library in your spare time. What moment you realize, what, you have something special here? You want to start a business. How do you pivot from that mode, just learning for fun, to, hey, there's something that I actually wanted to pursue and truly make an impact in this world?
Yeah, well, that is a I guess terrifying is a little bit of a strong word, but it is a very intimidating and in a lot of ways fearful moment when you
Mm-hmm.
decide to take something from the hidden corners of your garage and
Mm-hmm.
try to build your life and your funding and your financial support and your future around it. So what the recipe for that is I would find a hard time to tell you. I just know that I am not risk averse. And so the one big thing is, because I grew up so poor, and because I grew up in such a really difficult environment. I mean, to give you an idea of the environment I grew up in, I was the first male in my entire family to graduate from high school.
Mm-hmm.
My younger brother was the first of us to go to college, and my youngest brother was the first of us to complete college. So, yeah,
Wow.
we were historically not even high school. My ancestors did not even have a high school diploma, and so it very poor in some ways embraced their ignorance that in ways that were disturbing to me growing up, and
Mm-hmm.
so uh, I was highly motivated to not stay on that path. Um, and
Why?
well, because it really was very unfun.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember I was about 14 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if how much you or your listeners know about agriculture, but there's the old school irrigation techniques that were especially popular in West Texas, where land is really flat. And there's a lot of wells, and so it was really popular, where you dig what's called a bar ditch or an irrigation ditch, and they're 5 foot deep and 5 foot wide, dug into a V. And they would pump water out of a well, and then flow a little river or a little stream down these ditches. You'd put a curved pipe that acts like a siphon, and it would siphon the water up into the rows of the
Mm-hmm.
plants. And so those are bar ditches, irrigation ditches, and they would fill with silt after a few weeks of irrigation. And so we regularly had to go through with hand tools and clear. We'd have to hand dig the ditches and then hand clear the ditches, depending on how long it had been. And that was one of the jobs that my brothers and I got sold to doing quite often by our father. We were kind of traded around to the other farmers for labor. And so I remember I was 14. We'd been out there since 5:30 in the morning. We weren't going to get picked up till about 6 or 7 that night. 112 degrees outside. We're digging ditches, and if we didn't have a certain amount done when my father showed up to pick us up, he was very unhappy about it. And so we were working as hard as we could to avoid the consequences of that. And there was this one point where we're thirsty and we're tired and we're hungry, and it's no one's going to show up for hours. And we sit down, we take a break, and I just, tears come to my eyes, and you don't do that out in this environment. And my brother, who's a year younger than me, he hits me. He's like, "Dude, what are you doing? What's wrong with you?" I'm like, "Dude, I can't do this the rest of my life. I'm 14 and I'm already done with it." And I'm looking at 40-year-old men who are still doing that work with us, and I'm like, I can't do this the rest of my life. And in that moment, I decided I was going to pay whatever price. If I was going to work hard, it was going to work hard to be doing something different. It was to not be doing that. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of honor in that work, and I'm proud of the work I did, but I knew it wasn't a long-term solution. And so that those experiences motivated me to pay any price I needed to pay. And that, because I had nothing to lose, I was just not risk averse. Like, I'm not afraid. I've had some people tell me, well, if you don't take my offer, then, you're going to be, this is going to fail and you're going to be homeless and blah, blah, blah. You don't understand. That doesn't motivate me. Pain and suffering are my bedfellows, man. I'm not afraid of that. So, I'm willing to turn down any bad offer. I'm willing to persevere through any trial, tribulation, funding shortage, financial setback, technological setback, legal setbacks. they're just another obstacle to overcome, like I mentioned before.
Mm,
That doesn't mean I don't have my moments where I'm,
mhm,
wishing I could curl up on the floor, So
mhm.
we all have those moments, but the difference is I stand up and I'm like, no, no, that's not it knocked me down, but it's not going to stop me. And so you get
Wow.
up and you just keep going. And I learned that from I
Mm.
think kind of that desperate environment I grew up in.
Wow, Carl, I can just imagine all those challenges, hardship, really almost serve as a pathway for you to really take off your career as entrepreneur with all those challenges and what a parallel, which is so incredibly inspiring. So now, back to you, Carl. Tell us, how do you start your business?
So I had this particular motor technology that I'd had the vision of 15 years earlier. And I'd been tinkering with it in my garage and really going to scrap yards and buying, dead machines and disassembling old hard drives and doing whatever I
Mhm.
had to do to get the parts I needed. And then one day I realized I'd gotten it to the point to where it was working. And
Mm.
it was a technology that had significant it was a significant change. And
Mhm.
so um, it took me months. I mean, I sat there and looked at it and tinkered with it and played with it for maybe even over a year, and before I finally decided, okay, this is something I should pursue. And so I started. I didn't know anything about launching a startup.
Mhm.
I had worked for large companies. I'd led large teams, but that's a completely different world than
Mhm.
taking on entrepreneurship, especially when you don't have any support structure. I had no support structure,
Mhm.
nowhere to fall back. No, I've never had a plan B, which is part of the motivation to not quit. Is I don't have
Mhm.
I don't have a choice. They tell a story about the commandos back in World War II when they were, like, say, they were inside enemy territory, getting ready to blow a bridge. One of the first thing they would do is drive a stake in the ground and chain themselves to it. And that way, if the enemy showed up while they were working, they knew they couldn't run anyway, so they finished the job.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and it was a way to not panic and not run before the job was done. When you're doing a job that had to be done, or the
Mhm.
people behind you were going to die, then it's like the common
Mhm.
story is they were blowing a bridge to stop enemy forces from getting over to the
Mhm.
Allies, and they would stake themselves to the ground to make sure the job was done. And when they finished the job, then they could pull the stake out of the ground and run. And so,
Mhm.
sometimes that's what I had to do. Is I had to know, that's where not having a plan B comes in. I had a stake driven in the ground. It
Mhm.
was this was the only plan. And, and so I'm not necessarily saying that that's wise in all situations, but um, that's really what it came to. And so I thought, I can't do this alone. And I actually hit a major life shift that was not my choosing, and so there was a lot of things in upheaval. So it was one of those things. Well, where I'm in a risky situation to start with, so I might as well um, take advantage of it and maybe refocus my target. And so I kind of went to my friends and family who were around me, and I said, "Hey, this is what I've done. Let me show you what I've done. Um, I'm interested in pursuing this as a technology company, as a startup," and they all believed in me enough to come in and provide the initial support
Mhm.
to get it
Mhm.
launched. And a couple of successful prototypes later, we were able to go out and get more funding, and here I am. So
Mhm. Tell us more about that. Tell us more about currently the technology you are building.
yeah, so I've developed a new type of electromagnetic motion device. So we all commonly call them motors. And so the electric motor market, most people don't realize that 60% of the power consumed in the US is consumed by an electric motor. And so you can imagine at that scale of power use, even small improvements in the way a motor operates and motor efficiencies has a huge impact on our energy consumption.
Mhm.
Um, I had an idea for a brand new way of using magnetic paths to produce the motion and torque that an electric motor is for. And really, my motor kind of a hybrid between a transformer and a motor. It's not really a classic motor, although it does produce a motoring effect.
Mhm.
And so it's a device where we've fragmented or broken the magnetics up into really small pieces. And as a result, I was able to eliminate 80 to 85% of the steel
Mm.
normally used in a motor. Now, there's a lot of misunderstandings about what the steel in a motor is really for, because
Mhm.
common electric motors are just giant chunks of steel. You've got a giant chunk of steel that rotates, that's called the rotor. Then you have
Mhm.
another giant chunk of steel outside that, it's called the stator because it's stationary. And then you
Mhm.
wrap the rotor and the stator with cores, or you put some magnets, depending on the type of motor, and they push and pull magnetically off of each other.
Mhm.
And normally when you see something that's big, a big heavy chunk of steel, you think it's because, well, that's the steel you need to support the forces or loads that device is supposed to handle. And
Mhm.
that's true in most every situation except for a motor. In a motor, if you look at the shaft of the motor, that's the only thing that's really been sized for the power load. All the other steel in the motor is about being the conduit for the magnetic fields that are required to producing those forces. And you call that back iron. And so you have to have a closed loop of magnetic field going north to south. And so the steel is there to manage the amount of magnetic field that has to flow through that motor in order to get it to work. What I was able to do is break that steel up into a bunch of smaller components, which could handle the flow without all of the extra steel. And so I got rid of what's called the back iron. And now, I mean, there's still a completed loop, but it's self-reinforcing, where that back iron really isn't a wasted electromagnetic field anymore. It's put to use because it may be the back field on one component, but it's the
Mhm.
primary field for another component. And so by doing that, I was able to reduce the steel by 80 to 85%. Meaning I have a motor that's mostly hollow and can be mostly made out of lightweight components. As a matter of fact, I have an example here for those looking on the video. This right here is the world's first and only paper motor. So this motor, now this part here at the bottom you see is the base, a stand, but this is a motor that's made out of 85% medium density cellulose fiber, which is glorified paper. It's also cabinet grade MDF, if you're curious. So
Wow.
it's just, matter of fact, I pulled that MDF out of a trash bin at my buddy's shop. We pulled it out of his waste bins and made my motor out of it.
Wow,
Yeah.
Carl, first of all, it's obviously you have so much passion, so much love at what you do, and you obviously a doer and you love to, truly creating something that you're so proud of. That is incredible. So tell us, Carl, what drives you? What motivates you? Why this company, why this technology is so important to your heart?
Like I mentioned before, I've always been passionate about electromagnetism
Mhm.
and mechanical machines, period. So a motor is a unique device where it's electrical and mechanical. And so I get both of those passions rolled into one device. But I've always just known that there was a more efficient way of doing what a motor does. The
Mhm.
physics are all the same. It's just how do we organize it to make it more efficient at doing that and make it stronger, lighter, more energy efficient. And so um, I one of the things I do is I try not to start from the same point everyone else has started at. And I try, even though it's important, like I use the work that people did 100 years ago, 150 years ago, 180 years ago. There's these pioneers like Faraday and Tesla and Lenz who produced the research that provided us the information to use these electric machines today. But rather than making the assumptions that everyone else made in their pursuits, I like to stop and take kind of the 50,000-foot view and go, what are the very, very basics?
Mhm.
And maybe the way they did it's the best way, but I won't know unless I try other
Mhm.
pathways to it. And that's really where I started from is there a way to make this more efficient or to do the same thing along a different direction? And people have this saying that's well, think outside the box, or that person thinks outside the box. And I look at it much differently. When I was a kid, everything I put in a box died. Like I, I never understood this box idea, but I think a better analogy are ruts. So I don't know if you've ever lived on a dirt road, growing up in agricultural communities, most of the roads I grew up on were dirt roads. And so after a heavy rain, then you have these big, heavy trucks that go down the roads and they push 4, 6, 8-inch deep ruts into the soft, muddy soil. And those ruts make hard channels when they dry. And the most dangerous thing you can ever do is drive in someone else's ruts because your wheels are captured. It's like being on a rail car. If you're on a train and those rails are broken and go off in a ditch, guess where you're going? You're going in a ditch. And so if you're riding in someone else's ruts, you're going to go in the same ditch they went into.
Yeah.
And so I try to forge a new road, even if it's bumpy and hard and slow and rocky. Like, I'm going to try my own road. And so I think what happens is people drive in the ruts of everyone else who's done it before them. Well, they're going to wind up in the same place that person ended up in. And they're going to say, well, see, this is where it gets you. And it's like, no, well, you were driving in their ruts. And it doesn't mean that they don't wind up in a right place, but you wouldn't know that if you didn't try a different path. And so that's what I try to look at multiple different paths. And that's what I did here is I tried to reimagine how do these at the root level, how these magnetic fields work. And that's where I came up with the concept of the dual stators in the motor. So that means that there's an inside and an outside part that doesn't move, and then the rotor operates in the gap between those two items. And that, but it does it in a way that's very unique. It treats it again more like electrically. It's kind of like half a transformer and half a motor. So.
Wow, Carl. First of all, I really appreciate that analogy. Really, I can imagine those rods that you're mentioning and how people possibly can follow that rod going to ditches. And I love that beautiful way how you think about problems, how you really can reinvent the page in your own path and really be creative solving the problem. So, Carl, obviously you're so passionate about what you do. And I'm curious, now take a step back here, what legacy you want to leave behind?
The goal of Möbius Aero is to move humanity forward, but that really is the goal. So Möbius Aero is a Formula air racing team. We are a founding team of the new Air Race E, which is an all electric Formula racing league. So we're the only official team in all of the Americas, and I joined that as a way to demo our motor technology to the world. It's really the marketing arm of my motor company, which is Muse Motion. And so our goal at Muse Motion is to develop the pragmatic technologies to move humanity forward on a multitude of platforms. And Möbius is really our mobility expression. So all forms of transportation and mobility is where we're focusing on Muse Motion. And I'm sorry, Möbius Aero. And so our goal is to use this technology to change all aspects of life. To give you an idea of what our technology allows us to do here is a shell, a 3D printed shell of a motor. I actually have this 3D printed motor assembled and in use in our lab, but we are actually going to be building our airplane around the world's first and only 3D printed motor, and it will be the motor that powers our race plane. And so this allows us to not just 3D print the majority of the motor, but eventually when we're into large run productions, we can injection mold those motors and really drive the price of the motors down. But at the same time, our motor has 10 times the torque and 30 times the quickness, meaning how quick can it accelerate and decelerate, than a same class motor.
That impact, oh my goodness, I can only imagine. I think that future is not that far from us. Now, Carl, I'm going to back to you because you are a serious entrepreneur. This is the fourth business you started. I'm curious, now, every time you start a business, does it get easier? Now, as you have more experience, you've done it many times, on the journey-wise, was it easier and easier as you start more businesses?
Okay, it gets easier from an information standpoint. Absolutely. I've learned how to deal with the legal documents and the filings and the papers and the
Mhm,
business diligence stuff that you have to do. But at the same token, I've learned what I do and don't want to do in forming a company and founding a company. And again, I do things much different than everyone else does
mhm,
them. I look at it differently. And so, I'm not doing a normal startup where someone's only goal is how big can I exit in how short of amount of time. I'm not looking for an exit. I'm looking to change the world. I'm using to use
love
my
that.
company and my technology to do that.
Mhm,
Whereas
mhm,
most startups are focused on how quick can we increase our valuation so that the founders and the initial investors
mhm,
can take an exit and sell to someone else,
mhm,
which is perfectly fine depending on what your business model is. So
mhm,
for me, it's learning about what I don't want to do as much as it is learning
mhm,
about what I do want to do and how to do it. And
mhm,
it's a huge learning curve when you come from no experience in
mhm,
a startup, no experience in launching a company.
mhm,
But once you have that under your belt, then you get to start honing it and tweaking it
mhm.
and learning. I think one of the biggest lessons you can learn in starting a company is how to say no.
How to what?
How to say no.
Ooh, tell us more about that, Carl.
So just because someone shows up with money and you
Mhm,
need it doesn't mean that they're the right solution for your problem. It's so much more about who you're dealing with than it is what they're bringing, from whether you think they're bringing money or you think they're bringing connections or access or even customers. Like who is the person you are getting engaged with? That's what you have to really worry about, because a bad investor, a bad partner will wreck a great company, because
mhm,
they will do things that set you up for failure, because they're, who knows what their motivations are.
mhm,
Often it's
mhm,
greed or power. And so
mhm,
learning when to identify it, I would rather have 10 simple people who believe in us and want to take it all the way across the goal line than one what looks like big powerful partner, but
mhm.
they're really going to sabotage your real goals in the long run. And so learning when to say no, or even to sometimes to a prospective customer, is the hardest lesson to learn. Uh,
Mhm. I love that. I think, being an entrepreneur, having the power to say no and really selecting the right partner, right investor, the partner, that's really, really critical. And, Carl, I'm curious, what do you think, what made you so successful? Because I felt like along the journey, you have a lot of setbacks, a lot of challenges, but every single time you're able to step up, able to learn new lessons, you're able to move forward. I'm curious, in your word, what made you successful?
well, the jury may still be out on how successful I am or am not, but I think the reason why I'm here is perseverance. I just absolutely refuse to quit, even when I really, really want to. So
Mhm,
we all have those moments, but I think the perseverance and the tenacity
mhm,
and really the intellectual honesty with yourself too,
mhm,
on, is this a fight that I need to fight, and is this a fight I need to win? But
mm,
you have to start there. Is what I'm doing really what I'm supposed to be doing? And so I would say equal to the perseverance is the ability to pivot, to hit an
mm,
obstacle and say, is this an obstacle I overcome, or is this an
mhm,
obstacle that causes me to reevaluate my path? I've had to pivot a dozen times.
mhm,
I thought I was going to be here, and then I
mhm,
wound up going this way, and then it took me way over here. And eventually I'll zigzag back over to where I started. But
mhm,
I was caught in a rut, and I really
mhm,
needed to take a different path to get there. And so this air racing team, for example, never in a million years would have imagined this was a good idea, but it has actually
mm,
been a tremendous
mhm.
growth moment for me. I have a whole team of volunteers I couldn't hire if I wanted to.
Mhm,
High level engineers, highly valued and experienced people who are coming in and volunteering their time, effort, and brain trust to helping us accomplish our goals. And
mhm.
so you have to be willing to pivot, willing to evaluate your situation honestly, and then willing to overcome the challenges that are in your way.
Carol, you are such a visionary, and I think that is one of the very important reasons that you are able to inspire, whether it's volunteer or team member or partner, to join your vision, truly create a future that you are striving for, which truly admirable. So thank you. Carl, I'm curious, now looking back, I'm curious, would you If you had this magic wand, if you can change anything you want in life, would you do anything differently? And why?
We all have things we wish we could do differently.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. But I think the thing I would most want to take with me if I could go back
Mm-hmm.
was fearlessness. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the sun always comes back up tomorrow. And sometimes I felt like the world was ending, and I was afraid, and my body and my mind was racked with that fear. And to learn to be more fearless, I'm learning it, and unfortunately, that's something you learn from experience. It's a lesson with scars. But
Mhm.
if I could go back, I think the number one thing I would take back is to be more fearless, and and to take time to think things through in those moments
Mhm.
rather than feeling like I had some false urgency to act on. So
I love that. So now my last question for you, Carl, is, as a fourth-time founder and serious entrepreneur, and if you can share one advice to fellow entrepreneurs who are maybe about to start a business or maybe in the rut right now, what would you say to her or him?
obviously everyone's situation is different, but
Mm-hmm.
the number one advice I can give is to be honest with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
to look at what it is you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, to evaluate if there's a place where you need to um, pivot, to readjust, to maybe do the same goal from a different angle, instead of being locked into the rigid ruts of this is how it's done. And then the second thing is looking at those people around you who love and support you with no strings attached, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you're going to get their input, but you have to decide in your heart what it is I'm supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a time to pick fights and overcome them. There's a time to let things go, regroup, and come back at it a different way. And
Mm-hmm.
so that um, having the tenacity to persevere through the lowest and darkest times. Don't ever make a decision in the dark hours. Never make a decision, because you're not going to make a good one because you're afraid or you're exhausted or you're exasperated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Wait until you're at a place of peace and then decide what you're doing. And if you have to retreat to a place of peace to get there, then do that. Retreat to a place of peace and then look at it honestly when you're at peace, and then make your choices. That's the best advice I can give, because we're going to face troubles and trials and obstacles. So
Mhm. Wow, Carl, that is so beautiful. I love what you said about pivoting, which truly is the name of the game in the startup world. I love we talk about people, mentor, people surround us are so important. But most importantly, find your own truth, whatever that opinion it is, which one is more aligned with your own truth. And lastly, make your decision not at the moment of the darkest night. Wait for the second day. Wait for when the sun is bright out, when you feel more aligned, more peace, and then pick your battles. Thank you so much, Carl. I am so appreciate you joining today. You have such a beautiful wisdom. Your perseverance, your story is truly inspiring. So thank you so much for joining and being such an open heart and authentic. Thank you so much.
thank
And
you for
thank you.
having me.
Of
And
course. And thank you everybody for tuning in today. I hope you enjoy as much as I do. And I hope you have a magical week. Start your business, start your side hustles, because if not now, when? If not you home. We'll see you next time. Bye, guys.